We are live. Hello. Hi, Jackie. How are
Hello.
you? So, thank you for being here. It's an honor.
You.
Um, I'm Emily, the self-healing consultant, and this is my Trauma Survivors Transformation Stories interviews. I have Jacqueline with us today. Um, and Jackie, you are a business advocacy coach for millennial entrepreneurs with endometriosis.
Yep.
You help them build their business and holistically manage their symptoms so they can live the pain-free lives they deserve.
Yes,
Yes?
ma'am. Yep.
Okay. Awesome. So if you could just we'll just get started. Tell us a little bit about you and what you do, and then how you got to where you're at.
Sure. So I am, let's see, this year will be my 20th year with endometriosis. And back in March, which is Endometriosis Awareness Month, I spoke out kind of for the first time on a public platform and kind of told my story. And the feedback that I got was just overwhelming. And it was like, oh my gosh, we've been friends for 20 plus years, and I was going through something similar. I had no idea, but I'm still struggling. Like, how can you help me? And so that's kind of how I birthed what I'm doing now. Um, but yeah, so I have endometriosis, and endometriosis is where tissue that acts similarly to the lining of the uterus is found outside of the uterus. Um, Actually, it's found anywhere, right? Because it's not the lining of the uterus, but it's found within the body, and it can cause pain, adhesions, scar tissue when the body fight backs against that. And it's not a discriminatory disease. A lot of people are under the impression that it's for females only, and that's just not the case. A lot of people think that it's only for the pelvic region of the body, and that's not the case. And so, as I was going through my journey, which started at the age of 12, there wasn't a lot of information about it. There's still not a lot of information about it. There's no cure. And there's a lot of misinformation that's going around, and I was subject to that. I had gone through a journey of about 6 years, trying out all of these different techniques to kind of manage my pain and treat my endometriosis. And I was with a top specialist in my area. I'm originally from New England in the United States, and I convinced my doctor to do a laparoscopy, which is an exploratory surgery, to confirm that there was something wrong, because she kept saying, it's all in your head. There's no way this is your experience. It's impossible that this is your experience at this age. And I was missing 2 weeks of school a month. I was an A student, but I was still missing school and crawling to the bathroom. My brother literally thought that I was dying, and he told the whole school that I was in fact dying. Um, and so that was very traumatic, not only for me, but also for my brother. And after that surgery, she told me that I had nothing was wrong. She found nothing, um, and that there was no endometriosis. And after that surgery, I was actually worse than I was before the surgery. And that was incredible to me, because I thought I had hit my rock bottom before the surgery. Um, but I didn't. And so then I had to, that was it for me. That was like my first step, was getting my doctor to actually listen to me and do something proactive as opposed to reactive. And so that was kind of my first step into advocacy. And then it was like, well, screw this. Like, I can't live like this anymore. And so we got a second opinion, which was really like a fourth opinion. And I was on a wait list for about 18 months. At about 6 months in, I got pulled off the wait list by some miracle. Saw this top endometriosis specialist in Boston. I saw him on a Wednesday. By Monday, I was in his OR. That's how bad he knew my case was. And on Monday, he came out and was like, you have stage 2 endometriosis, and whatever she did, she was not supposed to do. This was from the 1980s. Nobody should be performing this surgery. And you have scarring due to how she performed that surgery, which is why you're in more pain than you were before. Which totally blew my mind, right? Like, we're putting our lives in the hands of these doctors, these specialists, and were saying, take care of my life. And a lot of the times it's well intentioned, right? Like, I believe on some level she did want to help and she was trying her best to do what she thought was right. Um, but she ended up leaving me worse off than before I came to see her. Um, and so that just exploded my anger and my need for advocacy, because it was like, if I hadn't fought for that surgery, if I hadn't fought for that second opinion, I wouldn't, I would still be where I was, which was depressed, suicidal. Like, I didn't know how else to go on with my life the way that it was before. And I had to be the one to step up. No one was advocating for me. No one in my family had experienced what I was going through before. They didn't have anything, and they didn't have tools or resources to kind of help navigate that with me. I had to be the one to do it. And so that kind of started my journey. And since then, I've had a lot of ups and downs. I've had 3 additional surgeries, and I'm now 10 years pain free. So going from someone who, for the first 10 years of her journey, was in pain almost 24/7, there was maybe 3 to 5 days a month that I would get relief from, to someone who, I think I had 3 days of pain this year, and that was in 2020 after my surgery in December. I still was having residual surgery pain. So to go from almost every day of pain to no days of pain was unfathomable to me at the time. And so if I can do it, if I can make that transitionary journey from just asking one question, making one person listen to me, then I can teach other people how to do that. And that's how I've kind of reflected and said, okay, now that I've got here, how did I get here, and how can I make this a teachable thing, right? Because I was a teacher for 6 years, so teaching people how to do things is very much, I very much enjoy that. So in March, when people were like, oh my gosh, this is me, how did you do it? How did you get out of this? That's kind of how I started helping other people kind of navigate this space. And I'm hoping that, just one impact on one life, that's all I want. But the goal here is to help a million women and to empower school nurses and counselors and like the people on the front line to kind of understand the symptoms and the signs, and to help be better advocates within the school system and within the medical system, and to educate medical practitioners, like, listen to your patients. A lot of the times the specialists in our field say the patients know more than the doctors, and it's true, because no one will know our bodies better than we do. So when we say something is wrong, something is wrong, and it's our job to work together as a team to kind of find out what that is. And so that's kind of how I help people, and I've used my journey to kind of step off into that platform.
Amazing. Very, very awesome and inspiring. And I would, I want to know, like, what did you get? Like, what did you find that helped you get to being pain-free, living pain-free? Like, what are the tools?
The tools.
What's the secret?
So for me, I definitely have taken a holistic approach. And I think that's because I spent the first 10 years of my journey doing everything that the medical community wanted me to do and it not working. Including surgery, right? Like, excision surgery certainly was the first time in my life, when it was done right, that I found relief, that I could breathe without there being a lot of pain. And so I don't deter or discourage anyone from using traditional methods to manage their symptoms or even their disease, right? Like, I love my excision surgeon. I will continue to go to him and to continue to have those as I need them. But living pain-free is a lot more than just excision surgery. And I think a lot of us, when we're told this is the key, life's going to change after this, it's not just the surgery. There are so many things that come before and after in order for you to get to that point. So for me, I've come up with the acronym Siemens, SEMENDS. And so stress reduction is number one. That's my first S. And Lacey's going to join us because she cannot not be on camera whenever there's a camera around. So the first S is stress reduction. And I didn't understand the impact of stress on the physical body until I started down this journey. I was the number one stressed out person. I probably still was until about a year ago, like the most stressed out person. And that was just the pressure that I put on myself, but also my disease, right? Like going through this process is stressful. And when no one believes you, your family, your friends, your medical community, when no one believes you, that is, in my opinion, the most frustrating and stressful situation you could be in.
Yeah.
And so for a long time, that's how I was. But in going through this journey of asking questions from this place of curiosity and understanding my condition and how I can improve upon that, it really was stress reduction, right? So stress has a physical consequence on the body, and it actually deteriorates like your cells. So as you're going through this stressful scenario, and when you have a chronic illness, it's going to be chronic stress in a lot of cases. I would say 99% of the cases. And so the most important thing, in my opinion, is the more stress reduction that you can have, the less damage you're going to have in your body, and the more opportunity your body's going to have to heal. And so meditation had been part of my life in one form or another since I was probably about 12. Like when I started to have symptoms, and a lot of that was mood swings and uncontrollable anger, my grandmother sent me a cassette tape of classical guided meditation music because I was very into classical music at the time. And so I kind of used those tools. I was already using those tools, but I didn't know. I was using them in a reactive manner as opposed to a protective manner and as a habit. And so after my second surgery, my first, well-performed surgery, this was part of our plan. Our plan was, okay, we're going to be using a lot of different methods to reduce your stress, and we're going to work as a family unit to do that. And so meditation and yoga definitely became a big part of my life. Like they were the number one thing. I would wake up at 4 a.m. to drive an hour into Boston to make it to the 5 a.m. class before work because it was so important to me. And so I would do morning yoga. I would meditate throughout the day. The next one is really about education and understanding what it is that you're dealing with from all aspects, right? So I knew that I had symptoms of a lot of different things, and I knew that something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. And so until I got that diagnosis that said you have endometriosis, okay, now I have a pinpoint where I can go research. I was already trying to research, but when your symptoms match 50 different things, it's hard to educate yourself on all of those 50 things. But education is, I think, number one in becoming a good advocate for yourself or for others, right? If you are armed with questions, you don't have to know the answers, but if you're armed with questions, you can be an amazing advocate for yourself and for others. And so that's kind of my step number 2. Movement would be my number 3. And I think that's the hardest hump for people with endometriosis and a lot of other chronic illnesses to get into is movement. It's like, well, I'm in pain. How am I supposed to move? And I endometriosis, I was a dancer, I was an athlete, I was moving around a lot, and I continued to play sports, not as well, but I continued to play sports all through my journey. And I think the more that we can move, the more active our body is going to be, and the more that it's promoting actually using the tools that it has within us to heal. And movement doesn't have to be running a 5K, which was a misconception I had. I was pushing myself beyond my limits, and that was not the way to do to go about
Mhm.
it. And so the trial and error that I've gone through, I think, is very much informed how I'm teaching other people to go about it. Because intuition, definitely listening to your body's going to tell you all the information you need. You just have to be available and willing to listen to it. And so movement can be as simple as stretching in bed. It can be, crawling on the floor. At one point, I couldn't do anything except crawl. Literally fall out of bed and then crawl. Like, that is movement. Just getting your body to coordinate muscles in a fashion of achieving a goal, right? Like, it doesn't have to be this big scary thing. But it has to happen. You have to be moving your body in order for you to get to that place where it's consistently healing. And then that kind of promotes that health as well. I'm now able to run a 5K. I'm now able to do yoga full time. Like,
Amazing.
that's amazing. But I never would have been able to get there if I didn't have that part of my toolkit. And adhesions, scar tissue, is very common in stage 2, 3, and 4. And movement can actually help stretch those adhesions so it becomes less painful. And so, yes, there is this big hump in the beginning, but once you get over that hump, it's so worth it on the other side. So we've covered SEM. So N is SEM. E. Okay, so we have our second E. And our second E, if memory is going to serve me, is I can't think of the E, so we'll come back to it. The next one is N, which is nutrition.
Mhm.
And I prefer to use food, but the acronym didn't sound as great with an F in there. So I went with N, and nutrition, when we go to the pediatrician, we go to our GP, they're always like, exercise, eat right, you'll be fine. What does that even mean, right?
Exactly.
How do we eat right? How do we eat healthy? Like, what does that mean? That was a huge journey that I went on, and that's probably, I would say, the second most important thing that I went through on my journey. So first was stress reduction. That was my absolute number one. In terms of finding relief at the end, but the second thing was definitely food. I went through the process of elimination diets and kind of trying to find my triggers, and I would do that at least twice a year, because your triggers change as you go through the year, as you go through different food cycles. If you're um, eating too much of something or eating not enough of something, your food triggers can change. And so I was doing elimination elimination processes at least twice a year. And I'll never forget the first one that I did. I cut out the 7 most common food allergies for 28 days, about. And it was like somebody lifted this heavy velvet curtain up above
Crazy.
my face. And I was like, I can think clearly. I can see clearly. Like, I didn't realize how detrimental, how much brain fog, how much thickness of things were clouding my ability to function until I did this. And so it was literally like somebody opened the doors, and instead of having to look through a velvet curtain, at life. I could see the leaves on the trees, right? Like, and I've had LASIK, so going from someone who's almost blind to someone with 20/20 vision, it was like that. It was like that transformation where, you have, and anybody who has glasses, it's the difference of seeing the world without your glasses to seeing the world with your glasses. That is the extreme that I got with just eliminating those things for 28 days. And I was able to work a lot of them back into my diet, and there are some that I keep out, but it gives you the sense to breathe. It gives you the space to breathe and feel like there's hope, right? And I think that that's such an underrated thing, is like food. We have to eat it to survive, but we can also eat it to heal. And so that's a big part of me working with my communities, free and paid. And I've actually teamed up with a functional nutritionist. She's my functional nutritionist who's worked a lot with women with endometriosis. And she's actually part of my client package. So anybody who works with me on any program has access to her top 3 tests, which kind of do hormone testing, gut testing, and food sensitivity testing. Because
Awesome.
I was pain free. And then I started working with Frankie. And when we did our initial intake form, like, I'm like, holy crap, I still feel like crap. I thought I had come so far from where I was, and I did, validated, but I still feel like crap. So where's the work that's left to do? And it turned out that my body doesn't even produce cortisol anymore because I spent all of those years so
Wow.
stressed. And I've done the work for a long time, but my body still is catching up with all that work. And so it's important, I think, to recognize the importance of stress and the damage that it can do to your body, right? Like, I'm literally not producing cortisol. And so I am
Crazy.
producing DHEA. So my body is in the healing, does have the ability to heal and clean up all the damage from stress. Um, but so yeah, so that's a big part of what we work on together in functional nutrition, is using nutrition to kind of help support that journey and understanding the amounts of different types of food and the types of vegetables and the types of carbs and the types of sugars and all of those things, so that you really do understand what it means to eat healthy for your body, right? Because everybody's different. Not two
Exactly.
people are going to be the same. And I know that that's super unfortunate. It's not an easy fix. Um, but it is empowering to know that there is something so simple as food that can give you such a huge transformation. And this is not a unique situation to me. I have talked to so many other women who have gone through what I've gone through in their own stories and who are pain free. And I'm like, hey, let's talk about our journeys. And food is the biggest overlap. Food and stress reduction really are the number 2 overlaps in our journeys. And so I think that that's super empowering too, is like, all of these things are within our control. All of these things are things that we get to do. We get to choose to do to make our lives better. And
Hmm.
so, yeah. And I don't think that any of these are like specific to women with endometriosis. I really do believe that anyone who wants to feel better, live more
Hmm.
fully, I think that this is definitely a system that you can apply and use yourself. Because I mean, who doesn't want less stress, more movement, and having food be the transformational piece in their life? I don't know. So yeah, I've learned how to eat my favorites, um, but in a substituted way. So I'm taking away, the things that are my triggers. Gluten, for one, is a trigger, even though it doesn't show up on my food sensitivity test. It's definitely one of those triggers for me. So I've learned how to make gluten-free lasagna and pastas and all of these dishes that I loved before. I still enjoy, and that's part of what I teach as well. Is Frankie will do the assessments and the testing and kind of give you the general outline, and then we work together to make those substitutions. So it's not just you on your own; it's you and your family can enjoy the same things that they're used to enjoying, just with different things.
Awesome.
So yeah, and then the next thing is detox. Detoxifying your environment, I definitely did not at all have any clue what that meant or the importance or the difficulty in doing this. I originally thought it was okay, like detox your mind. We're gonna do meditation. That's gonna be easy. I'll just sit here and be quiet. One of the hardest. But then detoxifying your environment, right? So my mom kind of jumped on this bandwagon a little bit, but not really, because the extensiveness that is estrogen disruptors, endocrine disruptors, is so widespread. Like, I was using Febreze air freshener. Well, that has a whole bunch of stuff in it. All of my candles were not safe for me to be burning. All of my cleaning products were not safe for me to be using. All of my dishes were not safe for me to be using. All of my cooking product, like my pans and pots and spoons and ladles and all that, not safe for me to be using. And so I was so overwhelmed by
Wow.
how can I make this transition to plastic free, to, no nonstick coatings, like all of these things that we are, bombarded with on a daily basis. Like, this is so much easier. This is so much cheaper. This is so great. Like, it's been a very slow transition, but it's been well worth it. I have definitely seen, and I have asthma from secondhand smoke when I was younger. And so I'm very sensitive to smells in the air. And I was using these plugins and I thought that they were great. I loved the smell, they didn't irritate my asthma. And the second I switched for 1 month, I switched to something completely different, just essential oils and a diffuser. And my lung capacity expanded beyond what it had been for the past 10 years. So just that small change, it expanded me more than I ever thought. The same thing with food, right? Like, that change was so transformational and I didn't realize it. So I've been slowly swapping out things in my kitchen and in my environment for the past 5 or 6 years. And it's made a world of difference. I can tell definitely just in my health and the way that I wake up in the morning. And so I've created a kitchen essentials course that kind of walks you through like the best
Amazing.
tools to have in your kitchen, the best, product base or material that you should be looking out for, the things to avoid, and those types of things, for my communities to use as kind of a mini lesson on the things that you can be swapping out over time within your kitchen. And then the next one is S, the final S, and that's sleep. And this again, I was very bad at. I always was pushing more and more, especially being an academic A student and trying to overcompensate, I think, for my disease and kind of the limitations that I had to put on myself at certain stages. So when I was a double major, double minor transfer student in college, which was, looking back, probably not the best idea at the time, I was probably sleeping 4 hours a night throughout my 3 to 4 years there, which definitely caught up with me and was not a good time. But I would, on school vacations, sleep for 17, 18 hours a day. And so that to me should have been the clue that I was doing something wrong, but I didn't. And I think that in and of itself was a trauma on my body, because when you do it for a long period of time, even if you do it for one night, your body goes into this reactive shock. And then it takes time for it to re-regulate. And again, had no clue.
Well, it's stress on the body, isn't it? Stress on the system.
Yes. And so, okay, I had gotten the meditation and the yoga down, But here I was counteracting all of that by only sleeping 4 hours a night, 5 hours a night. And so it wasn't until I fully dove headfirst into this holistic journey of understanding, okay, like what is the most important thing for me? Oh, so between 10 and 2 a.m. is really when my body is doing the most repair work, and I'm awake during that time. Like, oh crap. Okay, so how can we work through this? And I think it's important, like, you don't have to have 8 hours of sleep, but you have to have whatever your body needs for that key. So I found 7.5 is actually my sweet spot. Um, and I've tracked using my Fitbit my sleep cycles. And so I make sure that, so for example, I went from a sleep score of like 62 to 89. That's been my jump. And I'm getting more than the average for each of my zones. And I feel so much better. When you wake up from a restful quality sleep, like your life is completely different. And when you wake up and your sleep is crap, we all know what that feels like. And when you're doing it
Yes.
consistently, it's
But
like,
I'm a mum, so yes, I get it.
yes. And you
Yeah.
do what you can, right? You do what you can within your circumstances and you build on it. And 15-minute naps are my secret power. I probably sleep the best in 15 minute in those mini naps throughout the day. And so if I hit that wall at 2 p.m., okay, I hit a wall at 2 p.m., I take a 15, 20-minute, half an hour nap, whatever it is that my body needs, not overdoing it, but giving myself that time to rest and recharge and then get back up and do whatever I need to do. So sleep has definitely been the biggest from a long-term perspective, I think. Change is just the energy you feel when you wake up when you've slept well, and then that carries momentum throughout the day. And so, um, yeah, I definitely feel like it's been a journey and it's been enjoyable to kind of trial and error these things while frustrating. Being able to find that sweet spot and help other people get to that spot is like the most amazing thing. Is like, I now know the questions to ask. I don't know the answers for you, and I think that that's the most frustrating thing for people within my community. They're like, well, we want the answers, and it's like, you have to find
Not
the
just
answers
within your
for you.
community. I
Yes.
think everyone wants the answers.
Yes. And like, you have to find the answers for yourself, but I know the questions to ask and I can help guide you and give you suggestions, recommendations. We can talk through them.
Which, by the way, that's a lot. Like the fact it took you 10 years to figure out those questions, you're basically saving a decade
Yes.
of trial and error and headache and heartache and suffering.
Yes. And I
Yes,
think that's like, that's so amazing. Like, that's so
that is.
amazing to me. It's like, I not only get to enjoy this, but I can help other people get there faster. And when you're doing, you can soak up all the information I put out into my communities and do it yourself, sure. But working with someone side by side who's going to be your cheerleader, your advocate when you need one, helping you implement these strategies, it can be fun. It can be fun to do the trial and error. It doesn't have to be miserable. Like when I was doing it, it was miserable because I was doing it by myself. But looking back, I mean, it was pretty freaking cool that I figured out how to do all these things and that these were the things that made the biggest difference in my life was, you know, stress reduction, education, movement, nutrition, detoxing, sleep, like the who would think that these things would really be the keys to living pain free? I don't know.
So underrated and overlooked the basics.
Yes.
Like it's as though we overcomplicate things, thinking it's some kind of magic that we've never heard of. And no, it's literally the basics.
Yes. Because when you
And the
have
thing is, though, it amazes me how wrong, or like how wrong the Western
yes.
medicine get it. Like they don't. I don't understand why Western medicine, why doctors won't say food, sleep, movement. Let's explain what that means.
So I think the biggest thing that I've found on my journey is, and I went to law school, health law was my absolute favorite class, um, because it was the most fascinating. The Western healthcare system, if I can call it a system, was founded on the fact of not keeping people healthy. It was never about that. It was never meant to be about that. It was only ever meant to be about keeping people alive and keeping them from dying. So when we look at that from that perspective, when we make that shift of like its singular purpose was to keep people alive, to keep people from dying, there's a very big difference from keeping people from dying and keeping people healthy.
Yeah,
And
there's a
so,
disease model instead of a
yes,
health model.
yes. And so I understand now why things are the way that they are. And I don't understand why endometriosis is not a required course or a required part of the education within OBGYNs and gynecologists. Don't understand that yet, but we're working on it. I think
Same thing,
just,
by the way, goes for trauma.
yes. Like,
Hmm.
but again, if we think about keeping people alive, keeping people from dying, are these things really on the top of the hit list? No.
It's no, instead of being preventative and focusing on health, it's how do we manage symptoms? How do we prolong life with symptoms?
Right.
How, you know, yeah.
So it's all about it's, and I think about this, I thought about this yesterday. I wrote a post kind of about this shift in mentality. And now I'm drawing the correlation to this is like the shift in mentality here is the Western medical system is really asking like it's all about me and how I can prolong life. Like why me? Why this? Like what about this symptom? It's not about the underlying cause and finding that basis underneath. That's alternative functional Eastern medicine. That's about that. And so that's also why I heavily believe that you don't need to say no to Western medicine. Like excision surgery was my first step and has provided me the basis to be able to research and find these things. And just because my pain is managed doesn't mean my endometriosis is gone, which is unfortunate. But I would much rather live my life happy and under the impression that I'm healthy and be able to get to do all of the things that I want to do for now. And I will continue, my regular routine checkups with my surgeon and go through that process. But there is this stage of remission that we can reach. And I truly believe that when we marry up all of these foundational things, our body is just set up for success to fight off
Anything
all
and
of the
everything.
things. Yes, all of the things. And so that's a big part of why I kind of have the approach that I do. I find a lot of times it's either one or the other. People are like very much excision surgery is the only way, or people are like no Western medicine at all. And I'm kind of in the middle. Like you
But
have to do
that's the
what's right
thing.
for you.
I find that like our world, our reality, our society is very much just with the Western medicine. Like that's the system that we have. Eastern, alternative, holistic, it hasn't really, I didn't hear about it. I didn't know about it. It was all like kind of woo woo and I mean my parents don't think believed in it or in that it has any merit or that it's like I don't know. I don't feel that it's balanced enough. I don't even think that we have enough resources and knowledge. Like we don't hear about it enough. We don't know about it enough. You get a funny look if you're like, oh yeah, yoga and meditation. It's like, that's not for me. Well, you know,
Try it. I think that that's also a big thing is like belief. I truly believe that nothing is going to work for you unless you believe that there's a possibility for it. Like your brain is not going to your brain will always self-sabotage if you don't believe that you can do something. And
100%. But social conditioning
yes,
affects our
that.
belief, our
Yes.
mindset.
And I think that there is this movement,
There is.
underground or not, that is making its
There is.
way. And
It's changing, definitely.
yeah, and there are things, I mean, acupuncture is my number one go-to, like, reactive and preventative form of pain management if I do happen to have a migraine or, cramps or whatever it is. Acupuncture has been instrumental in being able to manage that without medication.
Awesome.
And PEMF, pulsed electromagnetic frequency therapy, like that is an amazing tool as well. Like there are all these different tools in our toolkit that we have access to. We just need to know where to find them. And so that's also part of,
Western medicine will say it's placebo.
yes. And I
That's the
think,
problem, though. They don't acknowledge
but it's dangerous
and
for them to acknowledge, right? Their
I
whole
know.
system is built on, we're going to keep you alive. Like the Eastern tradition is all about keeping you healthy. And I think as more people navigate towards Eastern medicine and towards, well, our copays should be based on your ability to keep me healthy. I don't know that our system will ever make that full switch, but I do think functional medicine is finding a place of accessibility within society a little bit better. And I think that that might be
100%.
where things marry up, right?
For me, I have a feeling that Western medicine is more interested in the money. But yes,
It's big pharma.
it is. Um, okay. I wanted to ask a few things. Well, I took some notes down. I think that there are two things that I really okay, there's a lot that I want to take away from this, and I'm gonna be talking to you a lot after this as well. But two things that I really, really kind of stood out to me that I'm a big advocate for as well, beyond the stress management and education and nutrition and sleep and everything. Um, Learning to listen to your body. I think when it comes to like I focus on the relationship with yourself, and I think that learning to listen to your body is literally I'm still learning, and I think that it really is key. I refer to it as learning to like correctly communicate with ourselves. It really is about communication. Emotions are communication. The stress is a communication. The lack of sleep, the fatigue, the symptoms, the
All of that.
migraines, it's all communication.
Yes.
And the thing is, we're saying, Western medicine, let's stick a band-aid, let's medicate, let's just ignore, numb, get rid of it. We don't want to deal with these symptoms because they're uncomfortable and they're unpleasant, but it's communication.
Right.
And so for me, like I think that learning to listen to your body, and your emotions and your feelings, all of it, I think it's so important. And I love that you said that and that you refer to that. And I also really love another thing that I advocate as well is that we get to choose.
Yeah.
And it is a choice. It's a lifestyle choice. It's a choice though. Like the fact that we can choose, so many of us, whether it's physical trauma, emotional trauma, disease, physical trauma, the fact that we have the ability to choose is something that we're not aware of enough, and it's very, very empowering.
Yes.
And so many of us do get stuck in this victim mindset of why me, why is this happening to me, I'm helpless, and that's the traumatic aspect of it. And I think that the more we spread this kind of message of it is a choice, then that's less traumatizing in a way as well. It really is like a healing mind shift.
Yeah, I think it scared the crap out of me, to be sure. Like, because
It's
once you
terrifying
know you have the choice, you've always
that
had
it's
the
on
choice.
you.
And it's on me to make that decision.
That's why I think it's so hard for people to get out of a victim mindset, because it's taking responsibility, and that is something that is
That's
really,
hard.
really difficult to do.
It's
I
really
avoided
hard.
it for a decade. because I
Me
just did
too.
not want to take the responsibility because that was terrifying. And also, when you've been so disempowered, and especially in childhood trauma, when you've been raised disempowered as well,
Yep.
having this idea that you will be empowered and that you have power, you see all those cliche like phrases like step into your power, like that's terrifying. The
Yeah.
subconscious is like, that's a threat. That's the unknown. I do not know how to be empowered. I do not know how to have power. Like, no, 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 no. Like that's a big one.
Yeah. And so that's, I think, oh, I'm so glad we're talking about these things.
Yeah.
So I think they're kind of married, right? For me, at least, my approach to this, to make it less scary, to make it an easier of a transition, is to slap the name advocacy on it. And to say, so I guess in the terms of woo, I'm a lot more on the woo spectrum than I thought I was,
Me too.
um, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
But this mind body connection, I think when you think about it as an integrative system and that your body is giving you that feedback,
Hmm.
what choice what choice are you going to make based on that feedback? And not have it be this big whole scary thing. It's just one decision. Just one decision at a time, and by taking it one question at a time, one decision at a time, you grow this confidence very organically. And as you grow it organically, you build up this sense of empowerment all on your own. And then when you finally introduce that as you've always had this choice, you will continue to always have this choice in determining how you want to live, what you want your future to be, and how you're going to handle the scenarios that come up. Like, that's how I kind of lead people through that, is one step at a time. Don't look everywhere all at once. Just what is the question at hand now? What is the thing that we're trying to heal now? What is your body telling you now? What does that feel to you? What does that mean to you? And then let's take the next step. And so by building it step by step, block by block, I think people kind of forget to look with their blinders open, but we get there eventually. And then once you do, you're like, oh, I made 50 decisions. I had that power. I chose how to do that. And then it's like, well, you've already been doing it. So
I love
now
that.
it's less scary. It's a less scary of a thing to, for the rest of your life, be in charge and taking ownership and that accountability, right? Like, education, advocacy, and accountability. Those are my three big pillars. Like, if you can do those three things, you're set.
No, I actually also think that it's what you're saying is it makes a lot of sense as well. I say, this small is sustainable, so it's not like trying to change everything at once because that's going to be nearly impossible to do.
Overwhelming.
But that's also the overwhelm, like for example, when it comes to elimination diets or foods or detoxing, you think like, oh my god, there's so much that I need to learn. Like I need to unlearn everything I know and relearn how to eat, how to sleep, how to, like, it's a lot, and that's really overwhelming. So being able to just make a focused, decision, say
Pick
like,
one thing. Yeah.
let's just pick one thing and begin there, and you get started. It's obviously far more manageable. Um, and then yes, you do grow organically. I like that a lot. And I was actually going to say something else about that, and I have forgotten now. Overwhelming, one step at a time. What was it? Oh, tip of my tongue. Pregnancy. Mm,
Pregnancy brain
pregnancy
fog.
brain. Total brain fart. Okay, never mind. Um, yeah, no, I really do agree that working on it, breaking it down is the way to go. Uh,
But yeah.
I'm really annoyed that I don't remember what I was going to say. Is that mindset shift? It was something
Yes. And
about
so when you
mindset.
when you step
Fear.
into that, like when you see, don't ask yourself why me, because that's at least the first 6 years of my journey was like, why is this happening to me? Why is this happening? Like, there's never going to be the answer that you want to find at the end of that question. But
Yeah.
what is this? What can I do? What does this mean? What is sleep? What is eating healthy? What is, or how can I support myself better? Like, those types of questions will get you answers, and it's one stepping stone. And then once you ask that one question, it'll lead you to another question, leads you to another question. And it's always making that progress. It doesn't have to be the answer. There's never going to be the answer. There's going to be answers that will build upon answers that will get you to the place where you need to be. But unless you make that shift, unless you're ready to make that shift and you're ready to take accountability, you're ready to take ownership over the choices that you're making, it's not really going to be achievable because somewhere inside you, you don't believe it to be possible. And then you're going to self-sabotage. And your body is going to self-sabotage in order to protect you because it sees that change as too scary because somewhere inside you doesn't believe. And so it's too big of a jump. And I think that that's so important. If you're in tuned enough to recognize when you're self-sabotaging, that then is, okay, I have the flag of self-sabotage. What is it that I don't believe I can do? And let's attack that and say, okay, I'm trying to make the change in my diet, in my nutrition, in my food. What is it that I don't believe to be true? That I can do this, that this is sustainable? What is that thing that I'm not believing? And then let's go address that. And then once you address that, start again and say, you know, let's do this. And then you recognize again. And I think the biggest shift for me was when I truly made the shift, the belief shift, that there is no such thing as failure and success. There's only information. And I am a type A, recovering type A personality. Like perfectionism, I'm a recovering perfectionist. And I'm happy to admit that. That has definitely given me drive and served me along my path. But when I stopped thinking about things as success and failure and only about information, right? I'm going to attempt to get to this place. And I'm going to learn so much along the way. Whether or not I meet that goal is all information. What are the things that went
Like it.
right? What are the things that went wrong? And how can I adjust along my path? Because then it's no longer about good and bad, right and wrong, success and failure. It's not a duality. It's neutral. It's information. And then that
I
helps
love
remove
that.
the information. The emotion. It helps remove the emotion from that information. And I
I
think it's
love
a lot
that.
easier to recover. Yeah.
I wrote that down. Gonna remember that. Gonna internalize that. Gonna think on that. That
It's a
I like
hard
that
one.
one. It
It's a
is
hard
really,
one.
really hard. But this is something that I also wanted to say about the self-sabotage. I mean, you talk about the belief aspect, which is really, really interesting to me because I didn't look at that aspect of it. For me, self-sabotage was all about just patterns. Like the way I neutralized it was by literally saying that we learn based on repetition, based on patterns, based on survival as well, so the mind seeks the familiar because that's safe. And so we at some point learned to do X because it kept us safe in that moment, it served us in that moment, and then that becomes our pattern, and then it doesn't serve us anymore, let's say into adulthood, and then we end up self-sabotaging. But that the self-sabotage is actually just repeating a pattern that we know because our mind perceives it as safe. And so
Yes.
it's really hard to change our behaviors because that's a threat and that's unsafe. And so
Right.
for me, like I try to look at it that way so that I understand what's going on, why my head's doing what it's doing, why my thoughts are the way. But yeah, behavior is based on thoughts, which is based on beliefs. So it makes sense that the belief would also be something worth addressing and looking at and exploring. And I did want to say that I think I remembered it now. You said ask the questions. I'm a huge advocate. My first number one thing is curiosity. Approach
Yes.
it all with curiosity. Just question everything. Why do I think
Everything.
like this? Why am I doing this? Why am I eating this? Why am I doing like
Yes.
literally curiosity has been, I think, my biggest, like my savior. The
Yes.
fact that
It
I am like ridiculously curious. I just want to
that was
understand it all. I want to
yes. It's just when you come from this place of no ulterior motive except to understand, you shift. Your energy
Yeah.
shifts, your vibration shifts, your perspective shifts. This was literally my post last night. Was some
Okay.
say
I'll have a look.
curiosity kills the cat, and I say it saved my life. Like when
It did. similar to.
approach from curiosity, everything just flows easier. And your
But
advocacy
even
coach,
with emotions, sorry to cut you off, like even I have triggers, I have a bad day, I have whatever, I'm freaking out, I'm angry, I'm stressed and whatever. I'm like, oh, yes, I get to get curious. I get to figure this out. I get to
yes,
figure out what's going on and what's underlying and what's the root cause and what's the belief and what's the blah, blah, blah. And I get
yes,
excited about it now. My bad days
yes.
excite me.
Yeah, because when you recognize
It's
that, I think
ridiculous.
is so cool. Is like when you reach the point of like having a trigger, experiencing a trigger, and then your mind like just shifts like, "Oh, I'm having a trigger. What does that mean?
Yes,
Let's go into it and
yes.
explore it." Like as opposed to having it consume everything about you,
And
right? Like
crush you
it consumes
and
your whole
self-pity and
day. Yes.
yeah.
And I think that's the most nerdy wonderful experience ever is like you feel like you've made it at that point, right? Like
Yeah.
you've made it out of the hole of the all-consuming drama and experience of the trigger and into this place of empowerment and saying, I recognize I'm having a trigger. Let's explore that. What does that mean? Where is this coming from? What was
Mm-hmm.
the pattern, right? Like I love looking at things at patterns because it gives you even more power. Like, okay, you have this one puzzle piece, but it's a pattern. So let's
It
look
helps you
find
connect the
another
dots.
puzzle piece and look at it, find another puzzle piece, and then put them all together. And what does that show you? Like,
Yep.
yes, 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 yes.
Yes.
Yep.
We get each other. Okay, cool. No,
Yes.
but I love it. And I want to ask before we wrap up, because I'm also heavily pregnant and need to go. Um, what is, I think, your biggest takeaway, like tip for someone, you know, starting their journey in their healing journey?
Ask questions. I think that's the easiest step to take as a first step is understand you're never going to have all the answers, but you can always have the questions. And I think that by asking the question, like I said, by asking one question, it's going to lead you to another question. It's going to lead you to another question. And you don't have to ask the questions yourself. And this is something that I teach in my communities is advocacy is a big word. It can feel daunting, but start with the basics. What questions do you have? So I always say pick whatever thing you're trying to deal with first. Is it a doctor's appointment? Is it a conversation with a spouse? Is it a conversation with your practitioner? Is it a conversation with your coworker? Like whatever it is, pick that thing and go through the steps. What are your objectives? What do you want to get out of it? What are your questions? What's the time frame? And kind of just start asking questions. And if once you go through that process of just writing it down all on paper, you can then give that piece of paper to someone else, me, your own advocate, your family advocate, whoever it is, and they can advocate for you or at least be there with you with a list of questions so that if you start to feel insecure, they can help empower you in that moment. So I really think questions is the first step
I love that.
for yourself and for your own journey with, figuring out what works for you with your, you know, with your doctor, with whoever it is that it is. But ask the questions and start there. And it will, I promise you, it will give you so much more than you think it's going to give you. If you just ask the questions and continue to ask the questions, even if you don't get the answers that you want, especially when you don't get the answers you want, like that should be the key to get you to ask even more questions is in any decision that you're making, you should always ask all the questions that you feel you need to ask so that you are making an informed decision. And I definitely think that that's a topic for a whole other conversation, but informed consent is something that frustrates the hell out of me within Western medicine and is something that I'm a huge advocate for is informed consent. And I don't think that our communities talk about it or what it is or what it's doing when we don't have it. Because that is 99% of all decisions made medically is they're made without informed consent. And most of the time it's done on purpose. And I think that that's BS. And so combating that, you can combat that by asking questions. And so yeah, to just ask one question. Take that first step and see where it brings you and be curious about it.
Awesome tip that I'm also going to take for myself and write down. But thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're
It has
welcome.
been an honor and a pleasure, and I love what you do, and I think that you're
Thank you.
incredible. Keep doing what you're doing, and I shall speak to you soon.
Okay. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Jackie.
You're welcome. Bye.